You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni coming to you after the finale of a 4-game series for the Braves against the San Francisco Giants as a 10-game road trip rolls on. And the Braves, they could not complete a rare 4-game sweep of a road team, and it's something they'd never done in San Francisco. I guess the saying can now be 3 out of 4 ain't bad. The Braves needed a series win. They certainly took care of business in this trip and on this stop of the trip to get that done. We'll talk all about it, including the big win that happened in Game 3, the unfortunate loss in Game 4, and then we'll get into what's ahead, which is a 3-game series against the Los Angeles Angels. We'll get into all of that right here on this edition of the Locked On Braves POSTCAST. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Subscribe to Locked On Braves, wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you making us your first listen of every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Of course, terms apply as well. Well, Jake, when you consider where the Braves were from a, I don't know if morale standpoint is quite the way, but we'll go with that. Following the Colorado series, where they should have taken 2 out of 3, where they suffered one of their worst losses of the year, to see them bounce back and take 3 out of 4 against the Giants, including a couple of extra inning wins, a big slugfest win. A lot of good things happened in that series, despite the fact they weren't able to complete the sweep on Thursday afternoon.
Very encouraging series for this Atlanta Braves team. I know it ended on a low note there, but you faced some really good pitchers in this series. You had some tough games, some close games that this Braves team just hadn't won a lot this year. Quite honestly. So I thought it was a good series overall. Again, I know it ended on a bit of a bummer there, but overall, really good series for this Atlanta Braves team, rebounding, responding from what happened in Colorado.
Yeah, and they had to do it. I mean, you could not let that linger. You could not let that carry over to that next stop and, start a bit more of a tailspin, which, honestly, the second half has felt like. It's kind of been, in a large part, a couple of different tailspins that have taken the Braves from a club that felt like they had some momentum heading into the All-Star break to falling basically flat on their face coming out of the break, rallying to turn things around, maybe getting back in the division race, then losing 7 out of 8, and now they have bounced back to take 3 out of 4 against a club that very much had its wild card hopes dashed at least a little bit by losing this series to the Braves, in particular in the fashion in which they did, where, that pitcher's duel in that first game, another extra inning game as well, and then you have the Braves go out and slug their way to a big win. You'll take the wins however you can get them, and the Braves saw a lot of different looking wins, I guess, in this series. But bottom line was, as far as the wild card race, as far as the postseason hopes, both these teams went into this series with it meaning an awful lot to them.
And the Giants came into this series on a really, big hot streak. They were playing really good baseball, had worked their way back into that wild card discussion. Meanwhile, the Braves were coming on, which is, as you said, one of their worst losses, if not the worst loss of the year. Unfortunately, there's a long list for that. Yeah, but it was 2 teams that were kind of going in opposite directions, and the Braves kind of flipped that here, and you feel much better, again, I think as a Braves fan coming out of this series, certainly than you did going in, and now you got a chance, and we'll talk about it later, but going Anaheim and an Angels team that, you should be able to hopefully continue that against. So the pitching, I think, was really key for the Braves in this series. I know you lost this one, and Max Fried certainly is, not quite looking like himself, but I thought he pitched better even than his line kind of indicated in this one. But overall, I thought the pitching in this series was fantastic for the Braves, and that's, was really hurting them in that week-long stretch where they were losing all those games. Is just all of a sudden the pitching went awry, and I thought things really got settled down in this series and obviously led to some wins for the Braves.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the pitching stuff that went awry was losing a couple of key starters coming out of the All-Star break. Max Fried had his IL stint. Reynaldo Lopez had his. It seems like Reynaldo is in line to rejoin the club when they get back home against the Philadelphia Phillies, which is obviously going to be a pretty big series. And we'll get into that maybe a little bit more later as well. But yeah, you had to get things stabilized there. And one of the stabilizing factors of this Braves pitching staff and of this starting rotation here lately, how about Grant Holmes? I know we didn't get to do a full postcast after that 13-2 win. And yeah, a slugfest. That looks great. The home runs are great. All those runs are great. But what Grant Holmes did on the mound that day, picking up his first major league win with 7 strong innings of 2-run ball, gave up a home run on a pitch, his first pitch of the night for that matter, but a pitch, I don't know how it left the park, but be that as it may, he didn't let that, at all affect his confidence and turned in an excellent start and one where, as you pointed out, you needed to get more out of your pitching staff. And that's the kind of performance you needed. And it comes from an unsung hero for this Braves pitching staff.
There's something there with Grant Holmes. I mean, I don't think there's much doubt about that. The Braves have uncovered something there with him. It's just, do you have the opportunity, kind of like we talked about with Spencer Schwellenbach, to allow him to kind of learn that on the fly at the big league level, which is what he's kind of had to do here as well. And certainly his best start yet, gets his first professional win, which is great, and gave the Braves a lot of length, which was great as well. You get that early lead in the first inning of that one. You do come back, you give up a run, but then he's able to settle down after that and go deep into the game. You never want in those situations where you get that big league early to all of a sudden let the other team back in it, and then you got to go into that bullpen. So I thought that, as much as anything, was really big for Grant Holmes to, just stop that right there and be able to put up some zeros, go deep into that ball game. But there is something there with Grant Holmes, certainly, that I think the Braves have found. We'll see, going forward, what he's going to look like, whether he can move into that starter's role or if he just becomes, maybe a long reliever type of guy, that kind of utility weapon as well. But either way, I think you're seeing something with Grant Holmes there that you can certainly work with and see a really meaningful pitcher of some degree in the future.
Yeah, I think you can. And I got a chance to talk to Grant Holmes for a while on the last homestand, and you can hear that interview on my show, From the Diamond, wherever you get your podcast as well. Shameless plug. But it was a fun conversation. And with Grant Holmes, I mean, we know a little bit about the story, the dream, the decade he spent in the minor leagues. Coming to the big leagues was anything but a sure thing at this point. And he was just really just trying to continue to keep that dream alive. And funny enough, he grew up watching the Atlanta Braves, so that was kind of the fulfillment of a dream, a little bit extra to put on that uniform to do it. But I asked him, now that you've had a month or so to kind of digest all of that, and now that you're getting an opportunity to start, what has it been like here lately for you? And he said, look, whatever opportunity or whatever role they want me in, I'm happy to do that. I consider myself a utility pitcher, which I thought was a pretty fun comment in and of itself. But he said, growing up and seeing some of the great starting pitchers that the Braves have had to get into the Atlanta rotation now, that's another sort of a dream come true for him. And he is, if you pardon the pun again, living the dream here lately in this Braves pitching staff. Now, how did he get such a big lead in his first major league win? Well, the answer to that, in large part, was Michael Harris II, back from the minor leagues, hits a grand slam in his first at-bat off the injured list, coming back from that rehab assignment with Gwinnett, where he had swung the bat extremely well, activated in time for Wednesday's game and making an immediate impact. Jake, I know we can't expect a grand slam per night from Michael Harris II. We're not even expecting a home run per night for Michael Harris II down the stretch, but you just knew that these are the kind of things that he can bring, in addition to, I feel like, stabilizing that outfield defense, that outfield mix overall, which has been completely destabilized with no Harris and with no Ronald Acuna Jr.
The outfield's been a mess. There's no question about it. Losing a Ronald Acuna Jr. and then losing Michael Harris, who was struggling before the injury. The outfield has been a mess for this Atlanta Braves team most of the year, but getting somebody back like Michael Harris, we've talked about, just kind of similar to the rotation where things kind of got stabilized in this series. Getting Michael Harris back, I think, kind of just stabilizes the outfield and, what he brings defensively, obviously, but he's coming up, was hot at the plate at Gwinnett, as you mentioned, and that seems to be carrying over. Had the hardest hit ball in the game on Thursday as well. So great to have that bat back in the lineup, and had to immediately get inserted to the top of the order because I'm sure we'll talk about it later. Yeah. He comes back, and what happens? Another Braves player gets injured, but hopefully nothing serious there with Jorge Soler. But either way, getting Michael Harris back, that bat in the lineup, and just that speed element that he now inserts into this lineup that hasn't been there before. Obviously great for him. And come on, McCovey Dave, get him his first grand slam ball there. Well, what a splashdown. I mean, what an absolute just majestic shot there. You had Robbie Ray on the ropes. That's what you wanted to see in that first inning. Take advantage of that. And boy, did he with that splash grand slam.
Yeah, he definitely did. And before we move on, I mean, I'm not trying to rain all over the parade of a Giants fan that obviously loves boating and being out in that kayak in McCovey Cove every single game. I just find it weird that this is such a strange negotiation for this ball, which is not really much of a milestone to speak of, just kind of a random home run, if you will. But people online, you may be shocked to hear this, Jake. They've got opinions about it. But I love that Valley Sports and Hannah Yates went out and found the story to give it a little bit more of that context. I mean, this is a difficult negotiation, and I don't think it has anything to do with the Atlanta Braves or with Michael Harris, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that, yes, Harris has millions of dollars, but how much do you think he's going to pay for this home run? That's not really the point. It's the principle that was the point. But be that as it may, we'll put that behind us. And you mentioned it more to the point and what we do the show for more so. The bad news for the Braves in this series, another injury. Doesn't seem to be major, but Jorge Soler dealing with a hamstring issue we'll get into that more as we go along and what that may mean for the Atlanta Braves lineup. And obviously, you'd like to finally have some version of what the Braves can expect to be full strength. You need Jorge Soler for that to be the case. And we'll talk a little bit more about Max Fried. His third start since coming off the IL, a little bit better, but still not quite where he wants to be, most certainly. We got a lot to get to. The Atlanta Braves postcast will continue right after this. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their low price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. In fact, with their last-minute deals, they can take the guesswork out of buying tickets for just about anything. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Just create that account, redeem the code. It's LOCKEDONMLB, all one word, for $20 off when you download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. That is Game Time. Let's take a look at the box score for the finale, which unfortunately was not quite as exciting as Game 3 of the series. The Braves won that one 13-2. They were able to secure a series victory, take 3 out of 4 from the Giants, but they will leave with a 64-57 record as the Giants climb back up to 500 at 62-62. Braves were shut out on 4 hits, no errors. They left just 4 men on base, so not a lot of opportunity in this one. 6 runs, 10 hits, 1 error, and 7 men left on base for the Giants. The losing pitcher, Max Fried, drops to 7-7. Meanwhile, on the other side, I mean, what Logan Webb did for the Giants was quite the performance. 7 2/3 innings of shutout ball. He allowed the 4 hits, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts for him. He has looked extremely good and is a big part. And the pitching is a big part of why I think the Giants have been able to kind of surge back into this wild card mix. And as much as we talk about the fact that Chris Sale's kind of the stopper for the Atlanta Braves, he's the guy that you want on the mound if you've got a game right now that you need to win. I don't know that there's a whole lot of debate about who the Braves would have starting that one game. I think that right now Logan Webb's kind of playing a similar role. All due respect to Blake Snell, who's also pitching great. It's good to have options if you're the Giants, but for San Francisco on this day, you needed Logan Webb to step up and deliver.
And he did. I mean, he was great. I mean, this was the best version of Logan Webb. You got that sinker that's running in on righties, that sweeper that's running away from it, getting all the ground balls. He's getting some calls a little below the zone too. The zones, the umpiring in this series wasn't particularly great, but the pitching was fantastic, I think. And Logan Webb was certainly on his game in this one. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to him. I know fans are going to be frustrated with this offense that has had its ups and downs, but I put a lot of that on Logan Webb, just having everything working, getting all those calls. Like I said, getting those ground balls. That's exactly what he wants with the sinker. I think we got the best version of Logan Webb in this one, unfortunately.
Yeah, Logan Webb, if you're curious, also is 3-0 since Deadpool and Wolverine came out. So when the Logan character came back to big screen, maybe that coincided with him going on this run. I don't really know. It may have nothing to do with anything, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because that is the kind of hard-hitting coverage you can find only on the Braves postcast right here as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Putting that aside, though, for Max Fried, I don't think it was a bad start for him. 5 1/3 innings, not as sharp as he wants to be. The walks were a bit of a problem. The home plate umpire might have been a bit of a problem from time to time. But putting that aside, 5 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts for him. A step forward, not having to pitch in Colorado doesn't hurt either. Not having to pitch with no rehab assignment after spending 15 days on the injured list, after throwing 1 inning in an all-star game, probably didn't have him as sharp as he wanted to be in his initial start. So, Jake, I think we can chalk up a little bit of progress here for Max Fried, but I'm sure he's still not happy with where he is right now.
I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you this is a very sharp Max Fried. That certainly wasn't the case, but it feels like he's gotten better these last 2 outings. From the first one, which was, just clearly didn't have anything. Last one I thought was a little bit better, and this one I thought was even better than that. Look, it's a tough play for Travis d'Arnaud. If he catches that ball, Max Fried potentially pitches 5+ innings and doesn't give up a run in this one. And again, we're talking about Max Fried, who still wasn't his sharpest and still was struggling with command a little bit in this one. So again, we're talking about Max Fried at maybe not 100%, and he still had potential to pitch this game and not give up a run. But as it was, he did give up a couple. A heritage runner scored. Jesse Chavez, gave up the home run there. But overall, Max Fried battled in this one despite all of that. Again, not going to tell you it's his best outing. Not going to tell you he's completely back from that injury. but he pitched well enough in this one to keep the team in the game. And that's what you want your aces to do.
Yeah, and 103 pitches for him, I think that's a good sign. Unfortunately, he was at the 103 before being able to get through the 6 innings. But you bring up that play at the plate. I mean, that was obviously a big one for the Giants there in the second inning. There are a few different factors there. Number one, I think the Braves probably were breathing a sigh of relief that Travis d'Arnaud did not get hurt on that play, because they could certainly do without any other Braves of any level of importance to this team getting hurt, because it's been that kind of year where even the backups have seemed to go through things, and the Braves just don't need that. So that was a bullet dodge, but that's a crazy play where, if there's not a runner on third, that's an easy out as well. Travis d'Arnaud is just going to pounce on that, fire it down to first. It was just kind of a perfect storm where the glove flipped, d'Arnaud unable to hold on to it, the slide, the injury scare there for a moment, a little bit of everything. So, again, you got to score to win the game as well. The Braves were unable to score on this day, so that probably also speaks to exactly what was going on the other side with Logan Webb. But all that aside, I would say that for Max Fried, this was progress, even if there were a couple of plays that weren't made, a couple of calls maybe that didn't go his way as well, and the Braves were unable to back him up on the offensive side. But we talked about the importance of bouncing back from that debacle in Colorado. Braves do that by winning 3 out of 4 in San Francisco. Thanks to that series win, the Braves, they pushed their lead over the Mets back to 2 games for that final wild card spot. So about the time that the Braves were getting pushed out of the wild card momentarily with how things were going when losing 7 out of 8, they've been able to kind of right the ship a little bit. The Mets, they're, I think, going to be nipping at their heels as well. There are a few other teams, the Giants, the Cardinals, also going to be chasing after the Braves. We'll see what this next 5-6 weeks looks like. But getting back into that spot, that postseason spot right there, Jake, I think that was important for the Braves. And they want to keep the foot on the gas as well with these 3 games against the Angels, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Yeah, certainly don't want to let up here. I mean, look, with the way the Diamondbacks and Padres are playing, it feels like a battle for that last spot at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of those teams are going to lose again. So, you can't really let up. You fell out of that spot for just a moment. We're able to grab it back and then give yourself a little bit of a cushion, but certainly not enough. You got some other matchups coming up with the Mets, obviously, as the year later in the year that are going to look like could be important games, but good to see them kind of bounce back from that and then able to build, thanks to the A's for winning a series over the Mets as well. That certainly helps. But you can't, you know it now. If you're a Braves team, nothing is given at this point. You're going to have to go out and earn this wild card spot. Not quite giving up on the division just yet, but you're going to have to earn this postseason spot, whichever form that looks like. And you just cannot let up on the gas, because there are other teams right there hungry to take your spot.
Yeah, as far as the division goes for the Braves, Philly's just 5-5 in their last 10. They have won back-to-back games, though. They were able to push that lead back to 7 games. That big 3-game series that's coming up, that's going to be an important one for the Braves and the Phillies, no doubt, as far as head-to-head is concerned. But you start to look at this National League West race, though. That, Jake, I think, and I know I talked about this a few days ago, who knows with what's going on with the Dodgers right now, if they're going to be able to hold off how hot that the Padres and the Diamondbacks have been over the course of the final few weeks. I mean, you talk about San Diego and Arizona both winning 9 out of their last 10 games, 6-game winning streak for Arizona as well, as those clubs are now tied at 2 games out in the NL West. So there could be a very different looking top of that wild card run or those wild card standings, I should say, if someone gets on a run and is able to take over the West. So a lot of things could be happening here in the final 5 or 6 weeks. Now, I also want to point out that as we have talked about all summer long and now heading into the dog days and down the stretch, how good would it be to see Matt Olson get going? I know he went 0 for 4 with a couple of punch-outs on Thursday, but Jake, the prior 9 games coming into that, 3.06 average, 3 homers, 9 runs knocked in, 4 walks, and only 7 strikeouts for him there. Up to 21 homers on the season. We were wondering for a while if he was going to be able to crack 20. That's just how low that Matt Olson's projections had gotten at one point in his struggles. But it does look like in some ways he's starting to get right a little bit, including hitting the ball to all fields, which is typically a pretty good sign for the big slugger.
Yeah, and the at-bats just are looking better as well, too. You're seeing them go deeper into counts. You're seeing them be able to drive that ball the other way. There were so many balls earlier in the season, and I don't want to go back to the dead baseball conversation, but just so many balls earlier in the season where he was hitting them to that left center field gap, and they just weren't getting out. And we're starting to see that happen a little bit more now, obviously, in the summer months when the balls normally travel better anyway. So that's, I think, been a big help for Matt Olson. But again, more so just the types of at-bats. You're seeing him take some of those pitches that he was chasing earlier on. So great to see for him. And he's going to a place in Anaheim where he has really good history as well. So hopefully that helps him, a place where he's very familiar. And look, the one real threat the Braves had early in the game against Logan Webb, he had 2 on with 1 out and Matt Olson up, and he rips the ball 105 miles per hour that just happened to find the first baseman's glove for an easy double play. But that was a good at bat too, that he worked full and then ripped one just unfortunately right at the first baseman. So yeah, the at bats look better, swings look better. Contact's really always been there for him when he's made contact. But overall, Matt Olson certainly seems to be trending up.
Yeah, he'd love a little bit of that batted ball luck going down the stretch. The Braves would take some of that as well. But unfortunately, you hit it right at somebody sometimes, no matter how hard you hit it. That's just not going to be able to put the runs on the board the way that he is accustomed to doing it. But the Braves have to be happy with what they've seen out of Matt Olson over the past week and a half or so. Certainly looks like he's going in a better direction. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with the Braves lineup. Of course, the Jorge Soler injury scare right now with the hamstring issue. We'll update you on that. And unfortunately, it looks like another Braves player could be done for the year after undergoing a surgical procedure, which is scheduled, if it hasn't already happened, to be happening very soon. We'll talk about that as well as the Braves postcast continues. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and right here in Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, on the Prize Picks app for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy with Prize Picks. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It's Liquid IV. Blast off with the iconic summer flavor of Popsicle Firecracker, a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MLB at checkout. That's $20 off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using the promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Well, Jake, let's talk a little bit about what else has been going on this road trip for this Braves team. More injuries, unfortunately, to deal with, and an injury-riddled season continues. Michael Harris II gets back. He moves into the leadoff spot on Thursday with Jorge Soler now sidelined after feeling a little bit of a pull, a little bit of a tightness in the hamstring. Had to leave Wednesday's game early. We'll start there. I mean, do you think we're ever going to get this unit together? I know that some people aren't available to the Braves that were going to be key to this season, namely Ronald Acuna Jr. and namely Spencer Strider. But when it comes to getting things going, Jorge Soler is supposed to be a big part of that. Hopefully, he's not going to be sidelined for too long. We'll find out this weekend, I guess.
Certainly hope that's the case. I mean, he was really starting to get going, too, after maybe a little bit of a slow start with the Braves. He had really heated up in that series in Colorado and continued in San Francisco. So hope to get him back atop that order because, like, Michael Harris is fine there, certainly, but I do like him kind of in that middle part of the lineup where he can do some different things and bring some speed there as well. But obviously Soler, he came over because he has that big on-base ability and the power. You know, it's a Ronald Acuna Jr. light. You know, the only thing he really doesn't have is that speed threat that Ronald gives you. So it's kind of a good fit there for this lineup. And, you know, it's a little bit of a worry. You get Soler, he hadn't played outfield all year long. Now all of a sudden he's having to play outfield every day. And that's, you know, a contributing factor and something you have to consider too when bringing him back, because it's not like you're just bringing him back to bat every day. When you bring him back, you have to make sure that he's prepared to play the outfield every day and play it effectively. So again, we'll see what happens. Hopefully it isn't anything major. It's just with the way the season's going, though, you're just all of a sudden expecting him to be on the injury list for a while.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. You know, knock on wood, that won't be the case, or I guess fingers crossed as far as that's concerned. And it didn't sound like Soler believes it's overly serious, but we have also heard that a time or two this year already. And, you know, your DH is already filled with Marcell Ozuna. And I don't think you want to go through a similar exercise with Marcell Ozuna where you say, okay, we'll stick him in the outfield, and then he maybe goes out and strains a hamstring. You don't want that. I mean, you can't avoid these injuries. You knew when you got Soler, he was going to have to play somewhere. He wasn't going to be able to just plug in at DH. And on the corners in the outfield is going to be the place for him. having Michael Harris back in the mix definitely helps from a defensive perspective, gap to gap. That'll be a little bit better, but we'll see how soon Jorge Soler can jump back in this lineup. It's going to be very important to have him back as soon as possible, but you didn't need me to tell you that. It sounds like A.J. Minter, though, could be done for the year. He's going to have surgery on his troublesome hip. He already missed the entire month of June with this issue. Unclear on if he's going to be able to return this year. Sounds like with the recovery time, Jake, from a procedure like this, it would be pushing it. But yeah, this is just the latest in a long line of injuries the Braves have dealt with this year that unfortunately have taken away some of their key players. And A.J. Minter as the key piece of that Braves bullpen that's not going to be available anytime soon.
Luckily, it's a deep bullpen for the Atlanta Braves, but it's a big loss. A guy that you expected to be, your seventh, eighth inning guy, somebody from the left-handed side too. So that is a big loss for this bullpen. And just hate it for A.J. Minter. Talked about the other day, not just for the team aspect, want him in there, want him to be one of those key guys, but also just personally, a guy that was going into the offseason, hopefully looking to get a big deal somewhere for the great work that he's done with the Braves over the last several years. And now I don't know what that's going to look like for him. So we'll see. Again, the timeline is very tight for him to be able to come back and do anything this year. But I think for his sake, he'd probably like to at least showcase that he can get back out there. But that velocity was dropping before the injury, and you got to imagine that was a contributing factor, was that hip injury. So hopefully he comes back strong, and we'll see if it's going to be in a Braves uniform again or not next year.
Yeah, it did seem like he had been battling something for a little while, and you can tell typically when a pitcher's off, and some folks would say, well, what does 1 mile an hour really matter? Yeah, it definitely matters, and it's a little bit more at times than that as well for him. So hopefully, speedy recovery to A.J. Minter. We'll see if he's able to get back in that bullpen mix before the year is over and pitch some important innings for this club, because goodness knows he's been asked to do that before, and the Braves would certainly like to have him in that mix. Atlanta's going to head to Los Angeles to face the Angels and throw three good arms at this club. You got Spencer Schwellenbach in the opener, then Chris Sale, then Charlie Morton. Angels 52-69 on the year. Quite obviously having a rough season for them. Will be good, though, to see that big smile of Ron Washington, who's in his first year at the helm for a club that's still trying to put it all together out there in L.A. And I don't know if even Wash's effervescent personality was going to be the cure-all for a lot of things they've had to deal with, including most recently we saw Mike Trout once again done for the season after re-tearing the meniscus in his knee. So a tough year. But for Ron Washington, he's a baseball lifer. He's a grinder. He's making the most of it, and it'll be fun to see him back out on the field, maybe talking with a few of those Braves players. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of pictures, a lot of videos on this trip.
Yeah, going to be a good return for Ron Washington, or rather a reuniting of those two, because we can't wait to see him again. Hate it for him, that Angels club. I was rooting for him, wanted to see them have a good year, see him have some good years, maybe a chance to win. But unfortunately, just not the case this year for him. And again, hopefully the Braves can take advantage of that and get a couple of wins. But, either way, it'd be good to see Wash back, big piece of this Braves team for so long, beloved by so many. And I know there's many people who were thinking that some of the struggles this year were because of the loss of Ron Wash. And I think that's, could be a contributing factor. How much, I don't know, and I don't think anybody does. But certainly he has been a big loss for this team. But looking forward to seeing him and the Angels again, hopefully getting some wins out there.
Yeah, as somebody who spent a lot of time around the club, I mean, you could tell the difference. I don't know that that's going to necessarily make somebody hit better, run better, feel better, or obviously not get hurt. But whether it's anecdotal or not, Ron Washington was a huge part, and so was Eric Young for that matter, of the Braves' overall culture on that team. And we know how important that is for the Braves. But you also know how important it is to have the opportunities to do the things in your baseball career you want to do. And I think Ron Washington was ready to go and manage again in the Angels. They gave him that opportunity to do it, and he's been at the helm for what has been another challenging season out there in L.A. The Trout news, obviously Shohei Ohtani leaving via free agency and heading on over to Chavez Ravine. You can't necessarily help some of the cards that you're dealt, but Ron Washington, the hard work and the work ethic is always going to be there. That is never in question. As far as what the Braves have going in game one of this 3-game series, it's rookie Spencer Schwellenbach, who has been terrific this year, coming off another good appearance. This has been one of the great bright spots, great stories for the Braves here in 2024, a season where we spent so much time talking about injuries, so much time talking about what's not going right. Let's take a moment and talk about something that has gone really well, and that's Spencer Schwellenbach. He has pitched his way into the Braves' plans, and Jake, the Braves are very glad that he did.
Certainly, this was not a guy that I thought, we'd even see this year, but it was someone I was really high on coming into the season, but just because of the lack of professional innings, obviously hadn't advanced all that high. But we know now with this Braves team, we should be well aware that if you're pitching well and you get to that AA level, they feel like you can contribute they will not hesitate to call you up. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but certainly in the case of Spencer Schwellenbach, he had, again, we say it every time we talk about him, that mound presence, which I think has been huge for him in making this transition. And something else we talk about, just kind of being able to learn on the fly at the big league level. He continues to just adjust, and, he's added pitches, and it's just incredible to see what he's done. And as you said, I think he's been the biggest and best bright spot of the season for this Atlanta Braves team. Certainly one that was unexpected. Chris Sale, who's pitching on Saturday, is another one of those huge bright spots, but Schwellenbach being one that I don't think anybody could have seen coming. Certainly, again, high hopes for him in the future, but I don't think anybody saw it coming this quickly.
No, not at all. I said this is on my show on Sunday as well. That's, if I had a list of pitchers that I would expect to make starts this year and what order I would put them in, I don't know that he would have cracked the top 10, but that just goes to show you the unpredictability of baseball. A lot of things happen. Injuries open doors that you wish that it wouldn't work that way, but obviously that's part of the game as well. And Spencer Schwellenbach has made the most of this opportunity. And you're right. He just continues to evolve, continues to add those pitches, continues to gain more confidence, and you can see it every fifth day. Schwellenbach will be on the mound 4-5 with a 3.95 ERA against the right-hander Jose Soriano, who's 6-7 with a 3.36. A first pitch time of 9:38 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night against the Los Angeles Angels, as the Braves will continue this road trip. Final stop, 3 games against the Angels, and they will have wrapped up this 10-game swing out west. That does, however, wrap us up for this late edition of the Braves Postcast. As always, we appreciate you riding along with us. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Leave us your likes and comments. Share the show with a friend to help the channel grow. We'd appreciate that. And subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, the Braves with 3 out of 4 against the Giants. They turned their road trip around. They'll look to keep that momentum going in this 3-game series against the Angels this weekend. And Jake and I will be back to talk to you after those games. Until then, once again, as Atlanta has gotten itself back on the winning track, we'll look to see what they're able to do this weekend. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We'll catch you next time. So long, everyone.